Good morning, I'm Nova Blake, and this is your complete political briefing for Saturday, April 11th, 2026. Today, a fragile ceasefire between the United States and Iran hangs in the balance as Vice President JD Vance touches down in Islamabad for the highest stakes diplomatic talks in nearly half a century. We have the full story and everything else shaping the American political landscape right now. Let's get into it. Starting with the top stories from across the American political landscape. A 2-week ceasefire between the United States and Iran is holding, but barely. President Trump announced the agreement on Tuesday, April 7th, contingent on Iran fully reopening the Strait of Hormuz to international shipping. By Friday, Trump was publicly accusing Tehran of doing, his words, a very poor job of living up to the deal, as shipping traffic through the critical waterway remained at a fraction of pre-war levels. With more than 600 vessels stuck in the Gulf region and global oil prices still elevated, the fragile truce is being tested before it has even fully taken hold. Vice President JD Vance departed Washington on Friday to lead the American delegation in direct peace talks with Iran in Islamabad, Pakistan. When Vance arrives at the negotiating table this weekend, he will become the highest-ranking American official to sit face-to-face with Iranian counterparts since 1979. The United States team includes Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Presidential Advisor Jared Kushner. Iran is represented by Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and Parliament Speaker Mohammad Ghalibaf. President Trump said the world will know within 24 hours whether the talks will succeed, and warned that warships stand ready if they do not. President Trump fired Attorney General Pam Bondi on April 2nd, making her the second cabinet member to be ousted in less than a month. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, Trump's former personal criminal defense attorney, has been named acting attorney general. Trump cited his frustration with Bondi's handling of files related to the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein and her limited success in prosecuting his political adversaries. Sources say Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Lee Zeldin is the president's leading choice as a permanent replacement, though no nomination has been announced. Democrats expanded their majority on the Wisconsin Supreme Court on Tuesday, April 7th. Liberal-backed candidate Chris Taylor, a state appeals court judge and former Democratic state legislator, defeated conservative candidate Maria Lazar by approximately 20 percentage points. Taylor's 10-year term gives liberals a 5-2 edge on the court, locked in through at least 2030. It marks the fourth consecutive Wisconsin Supreme Court victory for Democratic-backed candidates and the latest sign of Democratic overperformance in statewide elections since President Trump began his second term. Republicans held a congressional seat in Georgia on Tuesday, but by a smaller margin than expected. Trump-backed District Attorney Clay Fuller won the special election runoff in Georgia's 14th congressional district, succeeding former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who resigned in January. Fuller defeated retired Army Brigadier General Sean Harris by approximately 12 points, a significant narrowing from Greene's 29-point margin over Harris in 2024. Democrats have now overperformed in special elections across the country, but have yet to flip a congressional seat. House Republicans blocked a Democratic effort to pass a war powers resolution on Iran during a pro forma session Thursday, April 9th. Representative Glenn Ivey of Maryland attempted to pass the measure by unanimous consent, while most members were on spring recess. The Republican presiding officer gavelled the session closed without allowing Ivey to speak. Democrats, led by House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, have demanded Speaker Mike Johnson call the House back into full session immediately. Congress returns to Washington on April 14th, and Democrats say they will force a formal privileged vote at that time. Senate Democrats announced they will bring their own Iran war powers resolution to the floor for a vote when Congress returns from recess on April 14th. Senators Tim Kaine of Virginia, Cory Booker of New Jersey, and Chris Murphy of Connecticut are among the resolution's supporters. Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky is the only Republican publicly backing the measure. The resolution, if passed, would require congressional authorization for continued American military operations against Iran, It faces significant obstacles, including opposition from hawkish members of both parties and the near certainty of a presidential veto. Israeli airstrikes on Lebanon on Wednesday, April 8th, described in media reports as one of the deadliest single-day attacks on the country in recent memory, killed more than 300 people in Beirut and the surrounding region. Iran's military subsequently halted shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, saying the Israeli assault violated the ceasefire terms. Israel and the United States both maintained that Lebanon was not covered by the United States-Iran ceasefire agreement. The strikes have dramatically complicated the fragile truce and drawn sharp international condemnation from European allies, the United Nations, and Arab governments. Maine's Democratic primary race for the United States Senate is tightening and drawing national attention. Governor Janet Mills is facing a challenge from oyster farmer and newcomer Graham Plattner in what has become a surprisingly competitive primary. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has so far declined to weigh in publicly. Democrats in both Maine and Michigan, key battleground states for the Senate this November, say their top priority is selecting candidates who can win in a general election. The battle for Senate control this fall remains one of the most closely watched races in the country. Democrats' streak of electoral overperformance continued through early April. The party has now flipped 30 state legislative seats since January 2025, while Republicans have flipped 0. Democrats have also made notable gains in Florida state legislative races, including a seat in the district that includes President Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. Party leaders are pointing to this trend as a leading indicator heading into the November 2026 midterm elections, where control of both chambers of Congress is at stake. Now turning to Washington and the latest actions from the current administration. Here are 10 significant developments from the administration this week. President Trump signed an executive order on April 2nd imposing 100% tariffs on patented pharmaceutical products and their active ingredients. The tariffs, enacted under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, are designed to pressure drug companies to lower prices for American consumers and move manufacturing back to the United States. Companies that strike most favored nation pricing agreements with the Department of Health and Human Services and commit to onshoring production can reduce their tariff rate to 0. Large companies have 120 days before the tariffs take effect. Smaller companies have 180 days. With the firing of Pam Bondi as Attorney General on April 2nd, the Trump administration installed Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche as acting head of the Department of Justice. Blanche, a former federal prosecutor who served as President Trump's personal defense attorney during his post-first-term criminal cases, pledged to continue the department's focus on immigration enforcement, crime reduction, and what he described as keeping America safe. The White House is reportedly considering Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Lee Zeldin as the permanent replacement, with a formal nomination yet to be announced. The Trump administration announced a 2-week suspension of planned military strikes against Iran on April 7th, contingent on the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. The ceasefire, brokered through Pakistani mediation, followed weeks of escalating United States and Israeli airstrikes against Iranian military and infrastructure targets. The administration said it had, in its assessment, already met and exceeded all military objectives. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed that the strait must be opened immediately and without restriction, including without transit fees, as a condition of the truce's continuation. Vice President JD Vance departed for Islamabad, Pakistan on Friday, April 10th, to lead the American delegation in direct negotiations with Iran. This is the first face-to-face meeting between United States and Iranian officials since the war began in late February, and the highest-level American diplomatic engagement with Tehran since 1979. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Presidential Advisor Jared Kushner are accompanying the Vice President. The White House said President Trump personally asked Vance to lead the talks and gave him, quote, some pretty clear guidelines. President Trump publicly endorsed Republican Clay Fuller in Georgia's 14th Congressional District special election runoff, and Fuller prevailed on April 7th. The president praised the result on social media, calling it a convincing win. The administration has been actively engaged in special elections across the country as it seeks to maintain and expand the Republican majority in the House ahead of the November midterms. The White House also endorsed Republican Tom Tiffany in Wisconsin's open gubernatorial race, signaling early involvement in statewide contests this fall. The administration confirmed the signing of a new executive order on March 31st aimed at ensuring citizenship verification in federal elections. The order directs federal agencies to strengthen documentation requirements and data sharing protocols to verify citizenship status among registered voters. Civil liberties organizations and several Democratic state attorneys general have indicated they intend to mount legal challenges to the order. The administration has framed the measure as essential to protecting election integrity. The administration confirmed it is prepared to take its dispute over Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell to the Supreme Court if a federal appeals court does not rule in its favor. The White House has been seeking expanded presidential authority over the independent central bank, a position that economists and legal scholars say would represent an unprecedented shift in the relationship between the executive branch and monetary policy. The case is being closely watched by financial markets and legal experts as it works its way through the federal court system. Immigration and Customs Enforcement confirmed to members of Congress last week that the agency is deploying commercial spyware capable of intercepting encrypted communications. The tool is being used, officials said, to target fentanyl trafficking networks. The disclosure was made by the agency's top official in response to congressional inquiries. Civil liberties advocates and several lawmakers have called for oversight hearings, raising concerns about the scope of surveillance authority and the potential for use beyond the agency's stated counter-narcotics mission. The Trump administration's new pharmaceutical tariff framework includes country-specific provisions that reflect the administration's broader trade strategy. Products from the European Union, Japan, South Korea, and Switzerland face a 15% tariff. Products from the United Kingdom will face a 10% rate, with a pathway to zero under a future bilateral pharmaceutical pricing agreement currently under negotiation. Generic drugs, biosimilars, and orphan drugs for rare diseases are excluded from the tariffs entirely. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. cited the United Kingdom arrangement as a model for ensuring American patients pay fair prices. The White House declined to comment this week on a statement from First Lady Melania Trump, her first major public statement in months, in which she denied ever having a relationship with the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The statement immediately reignited attention on the Epstein files, a political issue that has plagued the administration since Bondi's departure. Congressional Democrats have not withdrawn their subpoena for Bondi's testimony before the House Oversight Committee, which had been scheduled for April 14th. The status of that deposition remains unresolved as the administration and Congress navigate the leadership transition at the Department of Justice. That is your full political briefing for Sunday, April 12th, 2026. The next 48 hours will be critical, as Vice President Vance sits across the table from Iranian officials in Islamabad for the first time since the ceasefire, and as Congress prepares to return to Washington and face its most consequential week of the year. I'm Nova Blake. Stay informed, stay ahead. We'll see you next time.